BookTube, and welcome back to April Adventures Episode 2. I've had a 2-week hiatus, but we're back, and we have some very moody, atmospheric music playing right now. I can't hear it, but you can, because I haven't recorded it yet, but I'm about to right after I take this video. And today's episode is on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. I have a copy here that I incidentally did not read. I read the Gutenberg press translation, or the Gutenberg Bible on the internet on my Kobo. But you know, before we start talking about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, let's get into the spirit of April Adventures, into the zoological classification spirit of this book, and take a walk and look at plants and trees. And by take a walk, I mean I've already taken a bunch of walks, and I've taken videos of like flowers and trees. And in the nature park that I normally go to, there's all of these signs on trees of what trees they are and all their classifications and facts. So I took some videos, some pictures of that, and I'll compose some original music that you're already hearing right now over it, just to make it fun, because it's April Adventures, so let's have a good time. And then at the end of that, we'll end up where we end up doing this video. Perhaps we'll be in some deeper water than a creek bed like I promised last time, but yeah, let's go let's go on this walk. Bye, I'll see you soon. Bye.
Yellow flower, wild blue phlox, pink azalea with a gargling heron behind it, floating tulip in the water, creek bed and a small Ohio spiderwort. Forest beauty like a fairy tale ending. House in the woods, on a walk, dusk falls, back to the creek. Now I'm gonna play on a can of beans. A bright red northern cardinal sings, and it's time to talk to all the trees. Blah, blah, lee, pie. Bald cypress, background, Ornisus sylvatica, American beech tree, Fagus grandifolia, white oak, Quercus alba, southern shagbark, Caria ovata variation australis, American sycamore, tulip poplar, Lariodendron tulipifera, and I somehow end up back at the spire of the church, and I see white azaleas growing in the golden lonely earth. Summer rain in the sky, and I watch the evening going by.
Remember when this video was about a book? Well, I got kind of sidetracked with that whole music project thing. You know, I've spent the last 2 days just making that sequence that you just watched, the video and the music, and man, it was so much fun. It was great, but I've not been reading. I've not been doing anything else. Just 2 full days of that. But I hope you enjoyed that. That was a nice little montage of the walk I took, and made some I don't even know what that was, Latin names of plant songs. It's very strange, But yeah, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That's what we're talking about today. The connection that I'm claiming is, like I said earlier, the zoological spirit. I was trying to like show y'all plants, just like Professor Aronnax talks about different millions of species of plankton that we don't know. So we'll get to that. Anyways, so yeah, this is the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, April Adventures, episode 2, thingy. And I think I'm just going to jump right into it since I've done enough non-book external related content. But I have here with me my little notebook with some talking points about this book and my experience. And I started numbering them and then it just turned into bullet points. But I think there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 things we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about my experience reading it. I'm going to talk about Ray Bradbury's intro from this little edition that I read. I'm going to talk about just the plot summary, the intro to the book. I never do that for some reason when I make these videos, so I'm trying to get better at that. Although I did with The Hobbit. Number 4 is what worked for me. Number 5 is what didn't work for me. And number 6 is just summing it up. So, yeah, let's get into it. Number 1 is my experience reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's a classic. I'm reading classics. It's an adventure. It's everything that you would think that I love. I didn't love this book. I did not catch the wavelength like I have been for everything I've been reading for a while. And I think there's a couple reasons why. I don't think it's all the book's fault. I think it's partly my fault. I think it's partly the translator's fault and other things. But yeah, my experience reading was funny because when I was a kid, I had read in my library in elementary school one of those heavily abridged, illustrated editions of classics. See, they probably had Moby Dick back then, but they had 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, some other adventure novels by Jules Verne. And I remember reading it, and mostly I remember certain images from the story. The one that really struck me, there's 2 actually, is the ship that they see in the water that is sinking with dead bodies on it. You know, when you're like 11, that sticks with you. And the other thing I remembered was them being stuck underneath the icebergs and me feeling like I was gasping for breath reading that as a kid. But besides that, I didn't know anything about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea when I went into this. So, I was pretty fresh. I don't think I even remembered the ending of the book. I had no spoilers. But yeah, so my experience is I had that, and then I read the Project Gutenberg free edition on my Kobo, and it was my first ebook experience, like I mentioned, and that was wonderful. I really enjoyed reading on an ebook. I liked that I could take it around with me. I took it to the gym. I was like on the freaking Stairmaster holding it. You know, you can't really hold a book otherwise because the font's too small and it's kind of just flaps around. But that was great. I just took it everywhere. And that translation though. What was that translation? I can't even find a person's name behind it. I think it was just done by Project Gutenberg volunteers. They did a pretty good job, I think. But did they? Because when I read some of the translation by Anthony Bonner in this, I felt like the translation here was better. So next time I revisit this book, it's going to be through this probably. You know, okay. I've been making booktube videos for a little bit. I smile when I talk. I get it. I seem like the most fun-loving person. It seems like I like everything that I read or that I do. But that's not true. I have a critical apparatus, guys, and I'm going to show y'all today. I think I've just been reading and talking about everything I love. But if you were a friend of mine in real life, like 1 or 2 of y'all watching this might be, you'll know that I have very strong opinions about art. And normally I don't like art that comes my way. But when I decide to just pursue art, I do like it. But 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I enjoyed it. It's like a 3 out of 5 for me right now. Anyways, that's number 1. That's my overall experience of this book. Number 2, let's get into Ray Bradbury's intro that he wrote in this edition, because that intro is really good. And he does something that ended up maybe ruining my experience of the book inadvertently. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of the intro, because it's good writing. It's Ray Bradbury writing. It's, you know what I mean probably by that if you've read Ray Bradbury. But yeah, listen to this and see what you think. This is how it goes. Consider America, first of all, the new breed of nations. Consider America a nation, because of its newness, ardent in its blasphemy. Set in motion by the centrifuge of the great wheel of the Industrial Revolution, this people flung themselves across sea prairies to stand on New England rimrock, and fling themselves yet on across land prairies. Shocking other ages, they blasphemed down the meadows and over hills as ancient as the memory of Jerusalem. Consider America, her fire dragon locomotives huffing out vast devil bursts of flaming spark, setting the lying grass afire as they went. Someone's been reading Melville when they wrote this, but anyways. Come to a forest, cut it down. Come to a mountain, quarry it to pebbles. Skip the pebbles across God's lakes. Build new mountains, finally, upright and ornamented with man's prideful incrustations. Then run men up and down elevator shafts to a heaven no longer believed in, from a hell much better ignored. Consider the authors who lived in and with these men, and wrote to channel this blasphemy, express it in symbols about which such men could enthuse like devil children. With a new nation being dreamt to life, set to rights with fabulous new toys, the uneasy dreamers cast about and came up with two most ardent blasphemers. Herman Melville, Jules Verne. American authors both. Melville, the New Englander, and Verne, the Frenchman, you say? Americans both? And then he goes on. So, I mean, it's a fun argument, and then he goes on to just say about how they were both kind of like, I don't even know how you describe his argument, but they're both kind of progressive-ish authors who blasphemed and took things that were happening and they just destroyed them and re-examined them. But I think Herman Melville really does that, and I think Jules Verne is just writing a story where he happens to be in the time of the Industrial Revolution where that's happening. I don't think he's really exploring those questions like Melville was. But the thing that I mentioned earlier about what may have ruined it is that he is immediately drawing a Moby Dick comparison. He talks about Moby Dick the whole time of this intro, and like a good 30% of this intro is quotes from this book and from Moby Dick. And whenever a Moby Dick quote came up, I just got like an electric shock in my body. I mean, he has the tiger heart that pants beneath the sea part in there. It was just so good. It was a terrible thing to read before reading this because I was reading a translated version from the French. Oh, I didn't mention this book's in French, by the way. French author, Jules Verne. But I didn't read this in the original French. I read it translated, like I mentioned. And obviously the prose is not going to be as good as like the best prose that's ever been maybe written that's not Shakespeare, but it also kind of is Shakespeare, like Moby Dick is. Point is, I got caught in the trap of comparison. And I knew, while it was happening to me, of the mantra. I have this like mantra I say all the time to myself, and I tell it to my friends probably an annoying amount of times. The mantra is, comparison is the thief of joy. Very true statement. Obviously, we compare ourselves to people who are more successful than us, and that obviously robs us of our joy. That's a terrible thing to do. We're all in different parts of life. It's bad to compare other people against each other or works of art against each other because they're doing different things. And you can even compare other people who aren't doing as well to you, to yourself. And that way that you feel good about yourself in that way, that's bad too. That's robbing joy from yourself. That's like that's like a pride thing. Anyways, I was comparing it to Moby Dick from here on out, and I couldn't help myself because I just had it written into this. So anyways, that's Ray Bradbury's intro. He talks about Moby Dick, and I'll go into some Moby Dick Jules Verne comparisons later on when I'm talking about what didn't work for me. But before we get into that, I'm gonna go to the next part of this video, which is part 3, a general summary of this work. If you've never read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I'm gonna give you the gist, and I'm not gonna spoil it like it was done in this intro, which every intro does for some reason. This is written by Jules Verne, French author. It was serialized in 1869 to 1870, and it takes place in the year 1866, which is mentioned in the first line of the book, funny enough. And the plot is essentially this. In the year 1866, a bunch of ships and frigates start having accidents. Some go down, some sink, one pulls into a port with a perfect triangular hole in its hull, and people start speculating, hey, there's some sort of monster or creature or something out there that's attacking ships. This is pretty freaking weird. And the narrator of the book, first person narrator, is a French guy named Professor Aronnax, and he has a very obsequious servant. I mean, that's an oxymoron. Not an oxymoron. That's redundant to say an obsequious servant. But he has an obsequious servant named Conseil. And Professor Aronnax is a professor of marine biology. He's world-renowned and acclaimed. So naturally, when all of these nautical disasters keep happening, they consult him and ask him, well, what the heck is going on? And he says, it's a giant narwhal. It's a giant narwhal going out there and plugging holes in these ships. And so the Americans naturally say, well, let's go frickin' kill that narwhal, because that's what we do best. And they go out there on the Abraham Lincoln, which is a ship, not the person. And they go out there to try to kill this great big narwhal that's out there. And Professor Aronnax gets invited, so he goes. And he meets on this ship, the Abraham Lincoln, he meets a Canadian who's angry all the time, which was funny because that's not the way I perceive the world based on the stereotypes that have been fed to me. Canadians are supposed to be nice. But yeah, this Canadian's name is Ned Land. And he is just like a pretty pugnacious whaler. He's like a harpooner basically, and he kind of provides like a different attitude and mood from Professor Aronnax, who's a little bit more chill, and Conseil is just pure neutral. So those are kind of three guys that we're following, who are sort of our main core that we associate with. And essentially, after a funny little escapade in the ocean where they basically don't see the monster, the narwhal, for like, months and months, and they're headed home because they're all defeated. Of course, they see it, and it's got this photoluminescent, bioluminescent thing happening, and they keep chasing it. It keeps teasing them, and they finally come up to it. Ned Land is standing on the hull of the Abraham Lincoln. He's holding his harpoon. Professor Aronnax and Conseil are on the side looking down like, oh my god, he's about to harpoon the whale. And Ned Land throws the harpoon in. It goes clunk, and it hits the side off of like the metal. And then a spout comes out of it. They get thrown into the sea. And basically, Professor Aronnax kind of comes to, and he's like, oh, I'm about to drown in the ocean. And then he sees, hey, Conseil's here. And Conseil just jumped in after him because he's a legend. And they swim and swim until they're about to drown, and they come onto the surface of the narwhal. And Ned lands on the surface, too. And they go, and it turns out the narwhal's made of freaking metal. So that's no narwhal. And they basically, a guy opens the hatch. Naturally, it's like a submarine. And it's like, ah! And he takes them under, and then they blindfold their heads, and they find themselves in a submarine, a state-of-the-art tech thing. It's called the Nautilus, and it's headed by Captain Nemo. And Captain Nemo, he's his own guy. We're going to get into him. But that is essentially like status quo. Now we're on the adventure. That's the plot. Not going to go really further into the plot. I don't know if I'll even talk about like things that happen after that. That's essentially what you're getting into, is that setup. And let me tell you, everything about that setup, amazing. Very well executed. It was very funny. It was really, really well done. I really enjoyed the comedy of Conseil jumping in after Aronnax into the water. Just great stuff all around. But after that, it started to not really work for me, which is funny because you think that now that the adventure is starting, it's about to like take off. But before I get into what didn't work for me, I'm going to go to number 4, which is what worked. The first thing that really worked for me about this book that I loved overall is the sense of wonder at the natural world. Our narrator, Aronnax, he's a marine biologist, so he is very educated on such matters, and he loves it. He just loves talking about, it's sort of what I mentioned in my Moby Dick video. Herman Melville just loves talking about whaling. Professor Aronnax just likes talking about, I don't know, these species of plankton that I mentioned earlier. We're going to get into that. But I like that he's passionate. And Captain Nemo is also a passionate guy. He's very well educated. There's a library in the Nautilus that they describe a little bit. And that sense of learning about the universe, learning about the world, always love that. I mean, that just feels great. It feels like the kind of literature that I want to surround myself with. Jules Verne was that kind of person. He was the kind of person who would go into the library and look up and memorize the names of like very esoteric species and then write them in a book so that people like me 150 years later have to look it up and find an outdated dead name for a plankton that doesn't really exist anymore because we killed it. Point is, he really showing off, I think, a lot of the time about his knowledge. That has downsides, but obviously baseline, you love that. That's the thing you love about like talking to people who are passionate about something. So yeah, richness of the natural world, the mystery of it, the exploration, the adventure element of it, all the great stuff. The action scenes, some of them were really good, some of them weren't great. but some of them are really good. I really like the shark scene with the pearl. That one's really good. Just the overall aesthetic and atmosphere. You're in a submarine under the ocean. You can't not feel the atmosphere of that. You can't not feel the 15 billion atmospheres that are over your head when you're, exploring the Marianas Trench, which they don't do here. I don't know if they even knew if the Marianas Trench existed, but the atmosphere and the aesthetic was great. I think this book has been somewhat aestheticized into just kind of this sort of feeling, this image that you see here. That all that stuff feels good when you're reading it. It kind of gives you like that nice book feeling when you're not reading and you're just kind of going about your daily life, but you still sort of have it's like you had a dream the night before and it's still kind of in your subconscious resting there. That's a nice feeling that you get from this book. So all those things worked great for me. And now, what didn't work? Okay. First thing, like I said, translation wasn't great. Not even gonna go past that. But before I even go really hard on this book or anything, let me qualify something. All art seems to have some sort of wavelength happening, or maybe I should say all great art. All art that was inspired, the person who was writing was actually on a wavelength. It wasn't just writing garbage, knowing. If a person really put their heart into something, I think that that heart is in the book and you can get onto that feeling and you can kind of float with it and it can sweep you along. Music's very much like that. For me, I never grow slowly to like music. I just don't like it, or it doesn't do anything, and then something happens and I'm on the wavelength, flying alongside of it. And books are pretty much like that for me too. Books, though, more than songs, I feel like books you can kind of go up and down with them, whereas a single song, most of the time, it either does it for me or it doesn't. Point is, this book, it had moments where I was really on that wavelength, and then it just didn't. So I can imagine that everything I'm about to say, every criticism, could be nullified by me just kind of tuning my brainwave to the right frequency and, falling in love with the story. This is a classic. People love it. Also, I'm sure you watching this, well, maybe not sure, but I bet a lot of people watching this do love this book, and it's probably some people's favorite adventure book. And I can actually see why. So me already being able to see why means, it probably does have great stuff. But let me just say what didn't work for me. First of all, the structure of the date and location starting every paragraph, not every paragraph, but half the paragraphs, that didn't work. And the reason why is because it's not a pure journal entry type narrative. And yet he's trying to recount it sort of as such, but it ends up in this kind of gray area mix, and that doesn't work. If it were maybe just dated journal entries the way Dracula is structured, maybe that would work. Maybe it would lend it a sense of more almost immediacy, he's writing on the day what is happening. But he's not. He's writing this whole thing later on. So whenever you hear at the start of the sentence, just it's, June 6th, we found ourselves, latitude, longitude, blah, 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 that just feels repetitive. And the worst thing that can happen when you're reading is that you just start glazing over things that are happening. You don't want to ever do that. You always want to engage, but I couldn't really engage with that every single time. So that didn't work, and that was just a little thing that kept being a stumbling block. Okay, that's number one of the things that didn't work. Number two is, this sucks. I hate this. But I never felt reading this that I had a really good sense of space, of where I was on the ship, where I was in the sea, where I was on the islands that they go to. Normally when I'm reading a book, authors do very little, and I can construct just exactly what's happening. I think that's most people's experience reading. You don't really need the Tolkien detail laying out every tree branch to know your surroundings. You can kind of just get a sentence that tells you you're in a carpeted living room, and then you kind of just imagine one that you already know, and you're there. For some reason in this book, I never really felt like I was in a space. I even kind of felt like I was in a weird dream, liminal-ish, I don't know, there's dark patches in the universe around me that I couldn't really fill in. And I wonder, and this is maybe due to the ebook reading experience. I've heard that reading a physical book is good for your brain. It's a physical thing. You kind of feel where you are. I wonder if tapping a screen or tapping buttons on a screen where it moves the text without actually changing the physical thing you're holding, I wonder if that mentally did something to me that made that process harder. I don't know. But I never really felt like I had a good sense of space or where I was. Okay, the dialogue was not naturalistic at all for me. And that could very well be a translation problem. Actually, most of these could be a translation problem. But that especially, dialogue, it was very stilted. The parts that were formal and educated, like Captain Nemo and Aronnax talking, those felt fine. But whenever it was like Ned Land and he was supposed to be angry, it just came off so one note. It had no subtlety or complexity. And I got the sense that it was just Jules Verne writing what he wanted them to say, rather than something like him having a conception of the character, and then the character comes to life, takes the bit in their teeth, and just kind of goes off and does their own thing, and the author is just writing what the character's doing. That kind of stuff happens all the time with, like, you know, most of the books that I've been reading. But I felt like this dialogue was like dialogue I would write, or something like that. I mean, I don't know, maybe I would write good dialogue. I don't think I've really ever tried. But yeah, I just felt like, you know, you want to get across an idea, so they kind of say the basic version of that idea. I'm not really going to give quotes, because I don't want to just harp on the negative stuff by like pointing it out like that. But yeah, that just didn't really do it for me. I'm sorry. I'm just going to have to keep apologizing to the people who love this book, but dialogue wasn't doing it. Okay, now characters. This is kind of like the penultimate criticism. The characters have parallels to Moby Dick, and there's no getting around it. Number one is Ahab and Nemo. Captain Ahab is the captain of the whaling vessel in Moby Dick, the Pequod. He gets his leg bit off by a whale called Moby Dick. And Captain Nemo, on the other hand, is the captain of this underwater submarine. And it's hinted, but hinted, is it even hinted? We know. There's like a picture of his family in his room that his family's not in the story, so they're probably dead. And he hates humanity, so probably somehow his family got killed by people or murdered, or maybe they died of like coal pollution. I don't know. But for some reason, Captain Nemo thinks that humanity has basically taken his family away from him. I actually have this written down in my notebook right here. I say Nemo equals family killed, so revolt against humanity, but he's still a violent human. Okay, so what that means basically is that Nemo hates humanity for its violence, and yet he goes around just freaking killing everything in the ocean. He even goes so far, I mean, maybe that Jules Verne is doing this intentionally. Yeah, it probably is. But he even goes so far as to be like super blatantly Hippocratic, where they come upon a pod of like blue whales or some kind of benevolent whale. And Ned Land, the harpooner, you know, trapped on the Nautilus. Oh, by the way, they are trapped. They can't leave the Nautilus. I didn't mention that. It's a kind of a critical thing. Point is, Ned Land, he wants to just go harpooning. He's a harpooner, sees whales, wants to do some killing. And this is what Captain Nemo says to him. He says, you know, basically, we don't need it because we don't need the food. It would be killing for killing's sake. I know that is a privilege reserved for man, but, excuse me, I do not approve of such a murderous pastime. He tells, I'm getting a phone call. That's my friend George. I'll call him back later. But he basically says, like, I won't kill just for killing's sake. And then, the next paragraph, they see a bunch of sperm whales, and, you know, Captain Nemo says, these are just violent, terrible creatures, and butchers them. Just rams the Nautilus's, like, spike through all of them, just massacres a bunch of sperm whales, which are as feeling, as emotional, as, I mean, human, as human can be that's not human. It's a mammal that has, like, family structures and societies and language. Anyways, I mean, and then right after that, actually, he says to Ned Land, says, well, Master Land, and Ned says, it is a terrible spectacle, certainly, but I am not a butcher, I am a hunter, and I call this a butchery. Got him. I mean, that's very true. So anyways, Captain Nemo, he's a hypocrite, but even, like, okay, here's the thing. That's sort of interesting, but it's not that interesting. Him being a hypocrite makes sense. That doesn't feel like it has that much depth to me. So we have Captain Nemo's situation. He revolts against humanity. That's kind of his thing. He's attacking, you know, frigates. He's attacking ships. He hates humanity. Captain Ahab is much more interesting to me, personally. He gets his leg ripped off. And instead of getting mad at whales, I mean, obviously he's mad at Moby Dick, but it's really clear that he's mad at the freaking universe. He's mad at everything that exists and that maybe doesn't exist, the spiritual world that he even doubts. He just feels, he has a gnawing, creeping feeling that the universe is just completely indifferent, that it just doesn't care. And he wants to strike through the mask. That's Ahab. I mean, this is just so fascinating to me. You could go about this forever. I have it actually written down here too. Yeah, Captain Ahab, instead of just like revolting against whales, like, you know, for instance, Nemo gets hurt by humanity, so he goes directly after the thing. Ahab sees through the precise thing that hurt him, and he assigns all the negativity of the universe that has happened to him in his whole life, and this is a subtle point, but in Moby Dick, it's clear that even before he gets his leg ripped off, he was having these like almost sacrilegious outbursts towards the universe, just so that the universe would strike him down for blaspheming, so that he could at least prove that there's something out there, that there's some sort of moral thing that even if he just breaks it, even if he's a bad thing, at least that shows that there's something. There's this chapter where the carpenter is working on his leg. He talks about how much he likes the vice, because at least the vice is firm. He's looking for that. Ahab is searching for something that's a little bit more spiritual, that's a little bit more, actually it's kind of the problem for most, like, spiritually seeking people, atheists or Christians, who just don't know what the answer is. That's what he's after. But Nemo's after something a bit more tangible, so that's just not as interesting. Anyways, I'm not going to go on about that because I'm about to do probably like a Moby Dick read along on this channel, so I don't want to spoil all my talking points that I'm getting from Hubert Dreyfuss's lecture on YouTube, which you should totally watch, by the way, because it's so good. But all right, the next comparison. Jesus, this is a 26-minute video already. I'm so sorry, and I did that whole montage already. This is going to be a long video. I'm sorry, unless you're enjoying it, in which case, feel free to, I don't know, feel free to have a great day. The comparison between Aronnax and Ishmael. Ishmael, the most fascinating narrator I've ever read in my entire life, because he's open to everything. He gets, like Hubert Dreyfuss would say, he gets into all the moods. He gets into Ahab's mood, but then he gets into the loving of humanity mood when he's squeezing the sperm. He gets into everything, and because he does that, and also just has an amazing prose style, everything is interesting and everything is loving, and you can kind of experience the world in different facets of whaling and all of the different spiritual, metaphysical things you can kind of strip out of the objects from whaling. It's amazing. Professor Aronnax is not a bad character. He's a friendly, nice guy. He's a marine biologist, but he just kind of describes things as they are. He's not really inquiring, more as he is just observing. So a bit flat for me, for my personal taste. Anyways, the last thing that really worked against me in this book is a very strange thing, because this almost never works against me when I'm reading a book, which is morality. Whenever I read a book that has morality that is questionable, it just never bothers me, because it's a book, and it's like, I don't feel like it's gonna threaten me. I don't feel like everything has to be right. I don't feel like I have to be right. Everything is gonna be wrong in some way, and not everyone's gonna have all the answers. And, I've been reading, like, for instance, I always mentioned Tale of Genji, and that's 1,000 years ago in Japan, in a very conservative society, and a lot of stuff happens in that book that is not okay, in my opinion. Maybe it's also my opinion that it's just not okay objectively, but I think that a lot of stuff in the Tale of Genji in the world is wrong. It's just, like, plain wrong. It's not just culturally wrong. It's not like an etiquette thing. It's like, no, it was wrong then in their culture, and it would be wrong now in our culture. Just in the same way that there are things we're doing in our culture right now that are wrong. But point is, despite that that's true about the Tale of Genji, doesn't affect my enjoyment of the book. I just get into it. I get into the world. I accept that there's stuff wrong with it, and it's like, I'm not really trying to judge it morally. That's not what I'm trying to get out of it. I'm trying to experience and be open to what these books have to offer. And if you're going to read anything in the world that's from another time, obviously it's not going to be right by your current standards. And the point is that it doesn't have to be right. It's not about the rightness. So it was very strange for me reading this book that some of the stuff that happens morally that I disagree with actually impacted my enjoyment of it. And maybe it's because it was so prevalent. And the moral thing that I'm hinting at right now is this. There is just a very prevalent, strong undercurrent through the whole book of human violence and genocidal tendencies the whole time. Whenever Aronnax discovers a new species or sees a nice bird on the island that they visit, there's always like a sentence like, and they allowed themselves to be killed easily with just one stone, and we killed 50 and then took them on board without any kind of commentary, any kind of qualification, besides once there was a sentence saying that nature will never run out because it will always be more powerful than humanity. And naturally, that's just a thing that Jules Verne didn't know. I mean, he was at the cusp of the Industrial Revolution, or maybe in the midst of it, and he just had no idea that we could totally destroy everything like in 50 years. So maybe if he knew that, that would change. But even despite that, Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick before then, and even he qualifies it, because there's a chapter in Moby Dick called "Does the Whale's Magnitude Diminish?" And he goes into like all these questions about, will the whales just ever get totally destroyed by humanity? And he comes away with a conclusion which is no, for some interesting reasons that I don't even think are true, but at least he gives it a chance. And also on the Moby Dick side of things, the whale might be, I mean, just on one interpretation, the whale might represent unrepresentable, like, cosmic, like, truths that can't be known. That's kind of what the whale can represent, because, you know, you can't really draw a whale, you can't get a good visual of it. It doesn't really lend itself to paintings. It's kind of an unrepresentable thing. It's kind of the mystery of life. And he thinks that the whales will never be killed. And I think that's Herman Melville's way of maybe saying, oh, there's always going to be mystery. We can't learn everything. But in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, there's the assumption that you can learn everything. That Captain Nemo is learning everything, because he's just a mad scientist who made a technological masterpiece of a machine, and that science is just kind of dominating. Anyway, so that genocidal tendency thing running through, the killing of everything they find, it even started to kind of poison all the, like, wonder of it, because it's like all these things that you find wonderful, you just kill. And, I mean, I feel like that's strange. Why should that bother me? It's a book, because it's, I could just read that and it not bother me, but for some reason it was just happening all the time, and I don't know. It really just kind of just dampened my spirits when I was reading it. But, yeah, and then the ending was unsatisfactory and quick. Okay, a summary of my experience overall is that I actually enjoyed this book, even though I just went on and on about what I didn't like about it. I'm reading all these great books, and this is also, for me, this is a good book. It had more good stuff in it than bad stuff in it, and I think it's very much deserving of a second read. So yeah, I already talked about the wavelength thing, which I have here. You know, didn't get on this book's wavelength most of the time, but maybe I will in the future. What else have I said? Oh yeah, if you're watching this 32 minutes in, plus whatever the montage was, and you have recommendations for me on Jules Verne books or short stories, let me know. I know that there's Around the World in 80 Days and Journey to the Center of the Earth, or even better, translations. If you have a really, like, beloved translation of one of these works, let me know. I'm rubbing my jaw because I'm talking fast and for a long time, so I need to just, like, give myself a massage after this video. Yeah, and the last thing I want to say, and I'll make a whole video about this, is just, like, thank you for the whole April adventure. I should have said this earlier in the video, but all the response to April Adventures so far has been astounding. Some of the things that people are doing, trips they're taking to visit friends, some of the videos I've already seen by Hannah's Books and Joshua Crebo. Steve Donahue uploaded 10 videos in a day, freaking insane. That's an adventure. I just love knowing and the feeling that people are out there watching these videos, and that we're kind of having a sort of, I mean, I say sort of just because it's the internet, but it is a human interaction, and we're influencing each other. We're talking about books. I made this event, and then people are having different experiences because of it. That's wild to me. This feels very real and also naturally surreal, because it's like I've never had an experience on the internet like this. So that's amazing. I have been beaming and grinning and jumping around my room when I see some of these comments and see some of the things that people are doing from this event. I know I haven't been as active, but that's only because I have spent forever making, like, a song, because it takes, like, just takes forever for a song to sound like that song the way it sounds, just because I'm one person. I have to record and write all that stuff and then mix it and master it and then edit the video. But I'll be making some more videos. My last point here are the upcoming episodes. I've already done all my reading for April Adventures. I finished the Maltese Falcon and I finished Treasure Island, and I loved them both. So that's coming up next. The notebook is going out. I'm done talking. Thank you for watching this. Y'all are amazing. I can't wait to make the last 2 videos, and to see what y'all make of any more April Adventures you have left. And, you know, maybe at the end of this video I'll, like, add a couple of bloopers or behind the scenes from what I did, but perhaps not. But either way, thank you so much. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, a great rest of your April. Stay hydrated, stay sexy, as Randy Ray would say. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Book 2. Also, I completely forgot to mention this, but I tried to film this video in a thunderstorm, because like a lightning and thunderstorm came, and I thought it'd be kind of funny to, like, do the 20,000 Leagues. Like, there's like a water connection or something, but that went about as well as you'd expect. Hi, Book 2! It's storming. I wonder how close this mic. So yeah, that was pretty funny. But besides that, I think that's all I really wanted to show y'all and say. I'm gonna go to bed. Been just making this wonderful video. It's been so fun for 2 days, but now I'm gonna sleep. So you can see the little bags under the eyes. It's gonna be a nice dream. So thanks, guys. Bye.